Good morning and a very warm welcome to our council meeting for the 7th of July. And this morning I'm going to invite Councillor Hadfield to open our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much, colleagues, for the privilege of doing this in a slightly different way. I won't be starting the meeting with a karakia or a prayer, rather than a reflection and some thoughts. And in doing that, I'll put a little bit of context around it, and it will become clear at the end on the reflection and thoughts. But I want to share with you a letter that was written on behalf of Te Rauparaha to my great-great-grandfather, Bishop Octavius Hadfield, on June the 12th, 1848. And it will have relevance to the reflection and thought. A little bit of background: I'm sure most of you know Te Rauparaha and his history and the warring activity that Te Rauparaha was involved in, his eviction from Waikato by Tainui and his eventual settling on the Kapiti coast. Bishop Hadfield, some of you may know a little bit less of it about. He arrived in New Zealand in 1838, 15 years after my great-great-great-grandfather, Archdeacon Henry Williams. This year, our family celebrate next year actually 200 years of residence in New Zealand. He was a very frail man and was ill for a long period of time, which is reflected in the letter from Te Rauparaha. And between 1844 and 1849, he was on his deathbed in Wellington. He was appointed Archdeacon of Kapiti in 1849, he was Bishop of Wellington 1870 to 1893, Archbishop of New Zealand 1890 to 1893. In some ways, a bit of a controversial fellow, but a man of deep-seated faith, obviously, and as a missionary of the CMS, the Church Missionary Society. He was a social reformer, he was a peacemaker, he was a teacher, he was a livestock breeder and farmer, funnily enough. First priest ordained in New Zealand in 1839. Very quite a linguistic expert. He read Greek, Latin and Hebrew and spoke 5 languages, including English and Te Reo, but was fluent in French, Spanish and Portuguese. I have none of those skills. I think he had a passion for truth and determination that right would prevail. So I'll read you the letter, and it is around a particular event, and that's the building of the church Rangiatea in Otaki, which was very significant at the time. And the letter says, my friend Wera, which is Harawera, a term of endearment for the bishop, they called him Te Harawera. My friend Wera, greetings to you who are so afflicted by your malady. Your love remains working away inside of me. That is why I set to work to create something to remember you by when you are dead. Even Te Rauparaha thought he was going to die. With you now so close to death, I regard what we did together with so much affection. My friend, this town, Otaki, has all of a sudden become quite large. When the church is completed, then it will be really fine. Pakeha have been full of admiration for it, even before the church has been raised up, which is blessed. When it is raised up, then it will really be very fine. I'm also building a home for myself. That is all from your loving friend from Te Rauparaha. And this letter, which is sort of looks a bit like that, colleagues, and those of you who are interested, was found in a New World shopping bag that my late father gave to me on his death. And interestingly enough, unpublished, and it is now, we've looked after it, you'll be pleased to know. It is framed in acid-free surroundings and is in the custody of my daughter. And I think the thing that this showed was, and this is my reflection, the respect, the affection, the trust and the unity of purpose that was prevalent in the 1840s. In my view, this letter from Te Rauparaha wasn't written by Te Rauparaha. We thought Tamihana might have written it, but that's apparently not the case. So author unknown, but to the Bishop in Wellington when he resided. And it does show that unity of purpose, and that's around the building of the church and the spreading of the faith. I brought with me a couple of things that are important to our family. It's a little bit personal. The Bishop's Prayer Book. And that keeps me, in a spiritual way, which might surprise some of you, quite centred in terms of the achievements in the respect of of what the early missionaries achieved. And in terms of history, I've actually got this, which is a handwritten diary of the Bishop's father, written on a journey started in 1778. And that keeps me centred on my quest for understanding factual history rather than mythical history. And I find those two things that are actually, in a spiritual way, very important to me and to the family. So my thought for the day, colleagues, is that as we deliberate on behalf of our community, is that we can do so protecting the integrity of democracy on behalf of our community, and that we do that in a respectful, affectionate, trustful way with unity of purpose, as was very prevalent, as history shows, in the 1840s. So thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity and the privilege of sharing it with colleagues.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We move on to apologies. We have an apology this morning from Councillor Stuart Campbell. We also note that our General Manager Francis is on leave, and welcome Bridget. Bridget is filling in for Francis today, and also Kathy Robinson, our GM, is on Zoom or about to join us. I also just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the tragic passing last weekend of Alison Lieber, the Fielding Farmers Market manager. A tragic accident. We have sent a message to her family and been in contact with them, but just wanted to acknowledge that today. Apologies, can we have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Ford. Seconded, Councillor Casey. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 3, request for leave of absence. There is a request. It's for myself from the 13th to the 24th of July. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford. Seconded, Councillor Hadfield. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 4 is confirmation of minutes. There is a resolution there. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 16th of June 2022 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Casey. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any topics on our agenda today that elected members need to declare potential conflicts? None? Excellent, thank you. Right, we can go straight to our public forum, and it's a really good pleasure to welcome Lachlan Crate. Lachlan, welcome back. Really looking forward to hearing your successful journey in sport, in basketball, and so please come and join us. Tell us a little bit about your experience, but more importantly, the exciting news you're waiting for.
We just hit a video so not talk too much.
Turn the music up, sound up.
What number are you looking?
14.
14.
Awesome, well done. Just share a little bit about where you're up to now and what's next.
Oh yeah, I've just got some tournaments coming up, like nationals, helping me get selected for the New Zealand team. That's going to Guam in November. Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So that most of that clip is from Hoop Nations. So Hoop Nations is probably outside nationals, probably the biggest basketball tournament in New Zealand. So that post at the end they had all stars. So he got picked as one of the top 5 players at that tournament. So he's made. So the selectors, where was the first camp? Wellington. So there's a selector from the under 15 New Zealand coaches from Manawatū. So he went around the country, I think maybe 400 or 500 players they trialled. So probably about 400 or 500 players trialled for that. So he's made top 24 in the country. And so now we're just waiting if he's made top 12. And then we have to stop eating for a long time to pay for. Which is one of the sad things about representing your country is that if he gets selected for Guam, he's looking at about $8,000 to attend that. And he gets told in August, and then we've got 8 weeks to find the money because the tournament's in November.
Crowdfunding.
Yeah. So that's where we are.
So does Sport New Zealand help with any costs?
No, not until, well, they say that that's subsidised, that the $8,000 is subsidised, but doesn't feel like it is, especially. I think probably once you get out of age groups, once you're in open, I assume that you start getting paid to play then, so it's a bit different. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's take some questions. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, that's pretty cool. A bit of a disconnect there for me though. Which team were you playing for? Like, was there a sort of regional reps or something? Or?
So the New Zealand selections regional say. So that Hoop Nations, you just put a team together. So
you put it, okay, I'm with
yeah,
you.
so you put a team together for that. Because Hoop Nations is a company independent of Basketball New Zealand.
I'm with you.
And so they run a tournament.
Right. Okay, got it.
That's massive.
Yeah.
But when he goes to nationals, we've got nationals in Auckland in 2 weeks. That's for so he'll play for Manawatū.
Yeah,
So
brilliant.
all of the New Zealand selection goes through Manawatū basketball.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well done.
Outstanding. Councillor Marsh.
I just wondering, looking at the stadium, etc., that you were playing in, and knowing that like Central Energy Trust and Eastern and Central, etc., whether there's an opportunity there to put in a grant application to either of those organisations. They both fall due prior to November.
I don't know.
So you've got one on the 31st of July and one, I think, on the 1st of November.
Hopefully, because if he makes this team, he'll be the only Manawatū player from a wider Manawatū to make a New Zealand team for basketball in the last few years. So no one's made, because they've announced under 17 and under 19, and no one from Manawatū's made. So hopefully, at least he might be got some other people asking.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done.
That's absolutely outstanding. It's been a privilege again to help you through our representative grant. Well-deserved recipient for that. We wish you all the best. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that decision and look forward to seeing your name there on the team. So thank you for coming today. Right, and following on in the good news vein, item 6.2. Welcome to Dennis Rogers. Dennis, I saw you over there. Dennis had a chat to me about an award that Keep Fielding Beautiful make around the community, and I thought the opportunity was appropriate to bring it here to council to put it on public record. Absolutely, take a seat and very warm welcome. I'll hand it over to you to explain what it is about.
Yes, well, I actually first attended a council meeting in 1965. As a 16-year-old, I was the 2ZA local reporter, and I attended the council meetings for many years, right through that period, probably through to the 80s. So, yeah, I've been a regular attender for probably longer than any of you guys have.
If I was born.
Keep Feeling Beautiful has been doing a lot behind the scenes around fielding. And I thought I'd list a few of the things that we've been doing in the last 12 months. We hold a regular monthly meeting at the Fielding Baptist Church on the first Tuesday of the month. We do regular litter pickups. We're doing them on the long weekends like Easter, Queen's Birthday weekend, and Labour weekend, where our members get out and with our bags around the streets. And also, some of our members have regular runs, which they do even weekly around the town. You'll see popping up around the town at the moment a lot of daffodils. Hopefully rec services don't mow them off. They were all plantings that were done by Keep Feeling Beautiful in association in some cases with the local school children. The Hurley Reserve was a major planting exercise done by Keep Feeling Beautiful. And we held every second year now the Best Garden competition, and that is due to be held again at the end of this year, and planning is underway for that. The other thing that is coming up, and hopefully we'll be able to use some of the council expertise, is that we're hoping to put an entry in for the Keep New Zealand Beautiful Best Town Award. It's got fairly technical, and the criteria to be met is quite involved, but we're working towards that at the moment. So that's some of the things that we've been doing. The other thing, and the reason for me coming today, is that we have this trophy called Keeping Up Appearances. And each month, usually each month, we make an award for an organisation or that has done something to improve the town, their lookout, etc. During COVID and last year, when we didn't have a Best Garden Award, we awarded some of the people's gardens where our members, when they were walking around town or driving around town, hey, there's a lovely garden at number so-and-so, such and such a street. And we'd make that award to that person for that month. Prior to that, and we're back into the routine now, we're concentrating more on the businesses in Fielding and the way in which they have improved their premises or gone out of their way with displays, etc. One of the most regular one was just here on the corner, that quirky corner, how that's been done and upgraded. One prior to that was the Gracie's building, where they've done a lot of paintwork and cleaning up on the outside of that. Over Christmas, it was the Christmas display that was done by, I get these paint shops muddled up. The one in the Upton Bolton Road had a beautiful Christmas display, and that was awarded to them for that. Rec Services received it at one stage for the ongoing work that they've done around town. But this month, we have decided that the council should receive the award. And this is for the improvements that have been done in Kauai Park with the playground and the ongoing work that's been done down there. The usage of that has been amazing, but not only that, the families that are coming are also eating in Fielding as well. And they're using our cafes, etc., when they come. And there's a lot of people from out of town who are coming and using those facilities. So it's my privilege this morning to present this trophy for this month to the Manawatū District Council.
Thank you.
We particularly invited our Parks team, representing there with Carl and Peter. Would you like to come forward and receive the trophy? So our congratulations to you and your team. It's an outstanding effort and it's something that we're very proud of.
Good work, guys.
And grab the photo. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for recognising that, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
Thank you. Apologies for lateness, your worship.
Thank you, Councillor Quarry.
Excuse me, Dennis, is it yours on the table?
That's the
No,
flicker.
it's the flicker.
I beg your pardon, my apologies.
Right.
Easy pass.
Item 6.3, welcome to Stephen Bullion. Come on up and join us. Stephen's here this morning to talk to us about the project, the work that's been going on in North Street with the cycleway and roadworks. So welcome, and look forward to hearing what you have to say, and then there may be a few questions.
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I'd like to thank the council for the prompt removal of the wheel stops outside the Makino Dairy. To improve visibility, it has made a difference. Also that the raised pedestrian crossings that are going up around town, that's actually a very good traffic calming addition. So I thought that it's worthwhile mentioning that that is a good addition to safety in the town. So my focus here today is to give you my observations as a truck driver and cyclist on the changes that have been happening in North Street with the road code in mind. The national standard is to have pedestrians safely separated from fast moving vehicles on footpaths or sharing the space with cyclists and everyone obeying the keep left rule. The construction on North Street appears to be an eclectic mix of ideas that leaves pedestrians, mobility scooter wheelchair users and motor vehicles confused as to where the cyclists are. The answer is that the bikes are everywhere and all at once. So we've got them on the footpath, on a bike path between the gutter and parked vehicles, a bike path behind parked vehicles, and also riding on the road with no marked path. Pedestrian crossings are now confusing as well because they have to worry about cyclists on the footpath, cyclists on the road, cyclists coming from between the footpath and the road, that little no man's land, and also combined pedestrian cycle crossings. So the road code states that cyclists can be on the road at speeds of 30+ kilometres an hour. This relates to all 200 streets in Fairwood, as well as the rest of the country. And the road code guides us to safely navigate our journeys. I've biked the entire North Street setup following the cycle lane several times, and I had 4 incidents near misses in doing so. I was riding on the cycle lane / footpath and I had a pedestrian approaching me. They moved to the left, which is what you do, which then forced me to move left. So I ended up close to fences where the houses were. But the cycle lane itself has been laid on the right-hand side, away from the house fences. So I'm actually technically on the footpath. The 45-degree turns where the cycle lane takes you back onto the road, I found myself looking over my shoulder at a stock truck approaching me, plus I'm still trying to negotiate that turn to be on the actual cycle lane itself. So that was quite close. Cars on Derby Street couldn't see me as a hazard approaching from the cycle path, as I'm behind a tree, and then within seconds, I'm out onto the road to pass in front of them. Now, at 30 kilometres an hour, I can travel 8 metres a second on my push bike. So in 3 seconds, I can be from here on the footpath, coming from out in front of the tree onto the road and upon them. So it gives them very little noise to, there is a cyclist there. The fourth incident that I had was a car was illegally parked on the grass opposite the Makino Dairy. And the guy opened his door as I came around past Denby Street. So I'm watching, that's what you're supposed to do, but he just did not see me at all. Right, so residents are concerned about exiting driveways with cyclists so close, and the removal of street parking is forcing more people to either park on their driveways, so they're parking stacking coming out from their houses. They're parking on grass berms, like the guy was opposite the dairy, and also blocking access across the footpath and the cycle lane. This is also impacting the Coombray Retirement Village. They don't have any street parking both sides of the road. They've now got yellow no parking out there. The yellow lines themselves have been buried underneath autumn leaves. So a lot of the time, whether you're in a car or on a push bike, you don't even know where the no parking zones are because they're buried. And because they're new, people aren't familiar and comfortable with what the current setup is. The yellow pipe fences are a bit of an eyesore and they remind me of an industrial site. And I don't think it really fits in with Fielding's small town rural feel. I think it could be a better design. They are needed in certain places, but yeah, they just do look industrial. The other thing that's been brought to my attention is that cars crossing northwards onto Makino Road and to Lethbridge Street on either side of the railway crossing now have fast-moving cyclists on those pedestrian crossings. So you've negotiated as it cleared across the road. As soon as you get across the road, you not only have a pedestrian crossing with pedestrians, it's also that section is now a cycle lane as well on the pedestrian crossing. So you go to jump over there watching for pedestrians, and all of a sudden there's me coming at 8 meters a second, barreling down. So I think that's an issue that needs to be looked at. Solutions that I've come up with is that I actually think that North Street is wide enough to have parallel car parking, a single cycle lane, and then the live car lane operating the full length of it, which is pretty much standard for the country or has been in the past. And a good example of that is Combolton Road at the moment. There is a reasonably clearly defined cycle lane, but you've also got car parking plus a live lane. And if everyone's obeying the road code, we can all travel safely. I also think that there should be further investment from the council. A lady in a wheelchair brought this to my attention that footpath repairs and safety was a priority for her, and she was concerned about cyclists now being on a pathway that's been widened to include bikes as well as pedestrians. The autumn leaves and just general cycle safety if you are on the road, I think there should be improved street sweeping so that the roads are clear of debris for everybody's safety, and that clear lane marking for cyclists and motor vehicles so that everybody knows who is where and where you are supposed to be as regards to your place on the road. Also think that there's a possibility for improved signage to help reflect what we want and what the NZTA would like and require motorists and pedestrians to be doing, so that everyone, once again, there's more clarity in it. And I think there should be a little bit more community input with regards to North Street because of some of the comments that people in North Street have made to me, and also regarding it being a high school traffic route as well. I do have a whole lot of photos here that I've taken that highlight some of the issues. If you would like to have them, I'm happy to pass them over for you guys to look at. Yeah, so that's sort of pretty much what I've observed and what I feel it is and what I think could be done to improve North Street.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, for coming today on your day off. Appreciate that, but also coming with some of the concerns, but also some suggestions around how we solve this. And it's very timely because we do have a workshop session later today on the project, getting an update from our team. So we thank you for bringing that. I'll just ask if there's any questions from our team that would like to ask you, councillor Quarry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thanks for coming and also thanks, as was mentioned, the suggested improvements. We've had an inquiry from a lady in a wheelchair, well, mobility scooter, and she was concerned about the North Street Marquino corner. And her suggestion was to put a slight roundabout in the centre of that road or that intersection. And it would be similar to what's at Bunnythorpe, sort of a very, well, the smallest type of roundabout you could make.
Yep.
What are your thoughts in regard to that? Would that be an improvement?
It potentially would be. I'm quickly trying to think of the whole setup because it's such a complicated intersection. Just with the railway lines and then having Lethbridge Street on the other side, I'm quickly trying to navigate. If I was coming from any particular direction, what would I encounter? So I think it's something to look at, but off the top of my head, I think I do need more time to actually start running more scenarios. But that actually is I think it is a very interesting idea.
It would just be raised so much,
Yes.
you know, so
Yeah.
you could, yeah.
Yeah, I do know that a trucking company has moved out to the end of Makino Road, and I've spoken to a couple of the drivers, and they've said that they're struggling because they cannot come up Lethbridge Street and then turn and drop around onto Makino Road. They've got to come over from Kimbolton Road over onto Weld Street to try to hit Makino Road straight on because they can't get their trailers around the corner. So having a low traffic island is good because there are incidents or there are scenarios where large vehicles do have to negotiate it. And at the Christmas parade, obviously you have traction engines wanting to come through, so they would then have to negotiate that intersection as well. Yeah, but I think something that at your workshop that would actually be quite a good thing to look at as far as would it work regarding all the scenarios of all those different streets coming together? So
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Worship Stephen. It's just a comment. Thank you so much for taking the time to articulate your concerns and actually present them to the public face. Your Worship's correct. We do have a workshop later on, and to be honest, I'm perfectly open to, very open to hearing solutions from the community and council officers regarding this situation. But at the end of the day, look, we've still got to provide safe transit for all users as well. So there's a bit to consider. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, councillor Shaw.
Thank you for bringing those to our attention. Sport Manawatū run a bikes in school program, and they've reported to us over the last 12 months. They've done one at Lytton Street School and one at North Street School, and they surveyed the children about who cycles around the town, and a lot of them cycle as a family at the weekends, but their parents forbid them for cycling to school because they feel it's too dangerous. I just wondered if you had a view around vehicular traffic in the respect of cyclists, as a cyclist yourself, because especially in the school zones, I observe that everyone's in a hurry and not prepared to take that extra few seconds or minute to allow, the courtesy of cyclists going or pedestrians going.
That I think falls into the category of the road code. Obviously, it's legally enforceable by the police and the courts. So I personally think the NZTA should be changing the rules around driver licensing, that at your 10-year renewal of your driver's license, you should be sitting and providing proof that you've done a defensive driving course, so that all drivers of all ages every 10 years are being reminded of their responsibilities and any changes that have occurred in the last 10 years. Clear lane marking, so that you're driving down the road in a car and you can see exactly where the cycle lane is. That's the issue that I have with the current setup, because the cycle lane does go from the footpath and just swerves out within 3 to 4 meters and pops out onto the road. And in one of my photos here, I do actually have a car blocking. So as I come out, there is a car so that any other vehicles coming down the road cannot clearly see me, or especially a smaller child or a smaller bike. They can't see you until the last minute, and then you're out there right on the live lane. Whereas the traditional setup like Bolton Road, where cyclists are just riding straight down the road, every driver is looking to their right to see, coming out of a side street, am I in the clear? You're looking for all vehicles. You're not looking for a cyclist 45 degrees behind you. You're looking down that left-hand edge of the road, because that's what we're trained and that's what we get assessed on to get our driver's license. So to me, the concept of cyclists being in the cycle lane that's on the left-hand edge of the road, if there's no car parking, or beside the car parking, so that everyone's got a clear line of sight and everyone understands where you are and where you're potentially going to be. Whereas what we've got now in North Street is cyclists just popping in and out all over the place. And with the incidents that I've had, it does highlight, just on a random bike ride on a random day, that there are issues and that I was putting myself in danger potentially by following the bike path. So does that answer it?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thank you.
Because it is a school zone all through there.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's good discussion, some really good points and some suggestions there that we will take. And if you could leave those photos, etc., with Ali, and we'll take those on board, and appreciate your time coming today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a rest of your day.
Thank you.
Right, moving on our agenda, we're up to item 7 under presentations. Welcome up our team from CEDA, to Jerry and the team. Come and join us up at the table. Morning, Bobby. Morning, and Robert and Claire, sorry, I forgot your name. Welcome, thank you. Now, Jerry just pointed out this morning that this is the first time he's been able to come and talk to our council meeting face to face without Zoom. So maybe normality is coming back. Yeah. So very warm welcome. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone. But today we just want to share our progress to date with you on some of our key projects. We also want to update you on some key focus areas for the MBC and the current SOI as outlined in the letter of expectation, and relate those back to you, as you know, and that that was provided to us from you as stakeholders. So look, I'm going to hand over to Jerry, because he's the one with actually all the answers. And so Jerry, it's yours.
Kia ora, everybody. Just a bit of an apology. I've got eyes that can see that far with my glasses off and that far with them on, so I'm going to read from my notes, and I'm hoping the click's going to work well. So look, thanks for the opportunity to come in, and Your Worship, as you said, it's really great to be here in person. I think I've met all of you before online, but not face to face. So we're just going to run through a few of the key projects that are going on at CEDA, and we're particularly mindful of how these impact one of our key shareholders in the Manawatū District Council. Just keep in mind as we go through these that we are sort of working in the traditional economic development space of growth poles with our significant events, which are, or significant projects, which are trying to attract, uplift for the entire region by having significant pieces of work going on that may or may not be in the region, but would attract economic growth to the region. So we'll head straight into it. So the first one is the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub, or Te Tanganui. So this is a really important strategic project for the region. It's important to both the district and the city, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that relates to the district in a minute. So it's a really key project. It's an integrated freight hub. In fact, last week I was in Auckland looking at the Kiwi Rail hub and looking at the Auckland ports, and in Christchurch talking to investors around this project. So it's really starting to get some lift up with it. So there's lots of work going on in the advocacy space, and the Manawatū region, from my perspective and from CEDA's perspective, will really benefit from this project as we increase the logistics presence in the region. There'll be uplift for parts of the Manawatū region's work in the Kawakawa Road Industrial Precinct, for example, where there may be logistics or wet production or other production activities that won't necessarily fit inside the Te Tanganui base at Bunnythorpe, but would be better aligned to, say, sitting out in the regions. So this is a really transformational project, and is positioning us as one of the 3 key nodes in the country for logistics. So I think that's really, really important for us. We're right in the middle of advocacy at the moment and targeting central and local government to obtain their support for this. And you may recall that there's 26 different councils that have signed up to this project. So it's got a very, very large and significant sort of cut through across the centre of the North Island. Now, it's definitely going to be driving inward investment, but it is a long game. So this project could be anywhere 10, 15, 20 years in sight out. We're hoping to get to a position of having investors getting interested in a number of different commercial models for signing up for this project in the next 12 to 18 months. Of course, one of the things that's popping away in the background is the Kiwi Rail resolution of the notice of requirement. Whilst that's not the only factor inside this project, it's a big key factor in terms of attracting a lot of investment. So we're going to watch how that unfolds with a lot of interest. The second one is the food strategy. And this is a really interesting piece of work. We've just completed stage 1 of this project, and stage 1 was having an international consultant working with a local consultant and a Māori iwi consultant looking at how we can reversion our agri-tech story in relation to lifting our presence that's led in the city, I guess, by Massey and other Crown Research Institutes and so on. But would have an absolute link into what's going on inside the farm gate and with other parts of what might be happening in the Manawatū region. So stage 2 of that project is going to be in front of the CEDA board at the July meeting. So I'm just putting a paper together at the moment. And what we want to do with that is have a deeper dive with our, I guess, stakeholders in the region and have a look at how it might have an impact inside the farm gate and manufacturing, all those sorts of things. So there's some really interesting things that I think might come on board with this. So there's lots of opportunities in the region for things like increased production through having better approaches to farming in the traditional sense. I was at the BOMAR conference last week, which was fantastic, where they were talking about all sorts of new things, including vertical farming, the fact that they were talking, which is a bit of an antecedent to having a distribution hub actually where food would be grown potentially right next to where it's going to be eaten. So there's lots of really exciting stuff in there. And I think the challenge to the group that's going to do stage 2 is to really think about how we can align traditional farming practices and making those fit into all sorts of different demands, particularly with carbon emissions and things, but how we might actually harness new farming or new food production possibilities as well. Just on some of the, I guess, business as usual stuff. So they were 2 key highlighted projects just around our business engagement. So to date, we've had in this year 171 businesses that have been contacted as part of the digital championing program that CEDA runs. 102 of those have been in the district, so that's really cool. There's lots of trends and themes coming out of this stuff that we know about, and we know there's some headwinds that we need to face in the region and across the country and indeed globally around what's coming in terms of cost of living, all those sorts of things, skill shortages and whatnot. But we're hearing the same old story from our stakeholders around the shortage of skills and getting people who've got the right skill set. And that comes from a lot of different angles. It could be training and tertiary institutions. It could be opening up borders to specific type of workers. It could be taking current workers who are in work and training them in a different way. So there's lots of those things going on. The regional business partnership services, we've serviced 46 people in the region. Calibration innovation grants, about 19. Business mentoring is going very well, and we're doing a lot of work in that digital ambassador space as well, which is really great. And you'll be pleased to know, Your Worship and councillors, that we've been re-awarded the regional business partnership contract for the next 3 years, which is fantastic. Just a couple of snapshots of some companies that we've been working with in the region. So we're doing a lot of support, and one of the things that's really interesting, as I talked about the headwinds earlier, is we're doing a lot of stuff which would be considered, rather than being economic development, being business support. So just really trying to, I guess, signpost companies that might have things that are sort of weighing heavily on them in terms of keeping their businesses afloat, or being able to expand a little bit, or being able to find the right people, just by sort of hand holding them and signposting them to the right government support, letting them know where they can go to get that support.
Your Worship, is that okay to take comments?
You happy to take comments as we go? Thank you, Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I just want to just jump in here, and it's really good to note the examples of business engagement, particularly around field and aviation. And the green shoots there are probably potentially another international flying school. So I just wanted to highlight that to other fellow councillors as well, that there's some real promise there from what will be an incredibly busy little place.
It's a really fantastic example because they reached out to us. We had a meeting.
Oh,
with them,
nice.
and we did a LinkedIn post. And
Good.
they started to get inquiries almost immediately.
Oh, super.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
So in the destination management workshopping summary, so there's been work going on across both of our shareholders in terms of trying to look at what might be a hook for our destination management planning. And yesterday, actually, I was at a workshop with Regional Tourism New Zealand in Wellington with Janet Reynolds, and it was just fantastic to hear about how important these destination management plans are going to be in terms of creating a national view of how we might get what they're calling high value tourism into the country. That's not people inflating their wallets, that's people who come in, enjoy what we have to offer and leave the country in a better space than when they came in. So, we're challenged around comments that we hear almost daily, most recently from Queenstown, talking about the volume of flights is going to be higher than what it was pre-pandemic, but not much thinking about how we can get those high value tourism opportunities coming into the region, which I think we can work well on in this region. So one of the things that's coming up in these pieces of work with the two shareholder groups and the businesses in those two regions is our real ability to build on our natural offerings. We've heard earlier today about cycling, and I think there's some fantastic work going on in the Te Apiti Gorge, and there's a bit of work I've been doing lately with the governance group, CEDA's coming inside that, into the Secretariat, to help push ahead that part of the narrative around cycleways in the region. There's an absolute benefit for that for the Manawatū district to be able to connect cycleways and eventually have, going from the closest to us national cycleway location, Whanganui, through this way into the gorge and across to the Hawke's Bay. It could just be fantastic. So we're really, really keen on that. So there's lots of work going on in there. There's lots of people who do mountain biking and do cycling in the region. I think that's underrated. Those people often have $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 bikes. So they are good, high value people who are what we talk about, those high value tourists.
Look, again, sorry to interrupt, but just in regards to the cycling, particularly east-west corridor, any chance still we can include the city to sea through Bayanesi and out that way? They're still very good. Community committee is still very keen to drive through the Bayanesi Trust, that component as well. I just, if it's all right with you, Jerry, just to leave that on the radar for a while.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good linkage there. Eh?
Great, thank you.
Okay,
cool. So just to quickly go through a little bit more, the shop window for the region in terms of the tourism and this sort of thing is often through CEDA, and making sure that we have the regional brand around the Manawatū being highlighted. So we're just making sure that in terms of that part of what we do, that's high on our agenda. We're looking at the gaps. There's often a bit of a statistical gap around what we need to know. So one of the ones that's been knocking on our door recently is the accommodation availability and the accommodation statistics for this region in terms of what beds are available and things. So we're trying to work with that. That's an eyesight function, not a CEDA function. So we just need to keep working on that one. So I just wanted to push on to updates and priorities. And as Bobby was referring to, in our letter of expectation, there were some very clear things put on the table by the district, which is fantastic. So just to give you an update on where we're sitting with those in terms of progress. So we talked a little about domestic visitation. So there's quite a lot of stuff going on in this space around promotions and media profiling and things. So obviously one of the ones that's been high on the agenda recently is the Country Road brand refresh and aligning with the new regional brand and making sure that that Country Road is getting a really good profile. There's been lots of media profile around the region. We've had features and stuff featuring Te Apiti and features in the Manawatū, the Kiwis, Tripster, News Talk ZB, New Zealand Herald, This Life New Zealand, and a whole bunch of other magazines and publications which highlights both the region and the city. And it's really building on our ongoing, pitches for both the region and the city around what's going on in terms of our domestic visitations. Interestingly, the Manawatū region held up very well in the accommodation statistics over the pandemic because people usually come here to do something, not to jump off a bridge. So there's often, it's held up very, very well. So our visitor nights have been pretty good. The Manawatū Summer Get Lost campaign was really, really strong. And then we've been doing lots of other stuff in capability building. So having travel and trade upskilling of operators. We've been doing things like looking at trade days. We've been looking at new videos with Tourism New Zealand, and it's featured fielding, Cross Hill Gardens and Block Arts and Sanson as well. And finally, in that space, we've been doing some work on the sector profiling to lift the sector profiling for tourism and domestic visitation for us as well.
So just,
Councillor Bowser.
yeah, we had a good article by New Zealand Herald on our reserve up Rangiwahia. And then someone to emailed me and said, could we get that into stuff? Obviously, the two newspapers are different. New Zealand Herald and stuff, I'm not sure whether they intermingle or not, but someone said, could we approach stuff and get it in that, in their profile or their area? So could that happen, or are they?
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that would be fantastic if where there's opportunities like that the elected members see, just drop me an email.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll get it on to Janet's time, and we can see if we can get that pushed through.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So just in the inward investment space, so just quickly, we have inward investment is a big thing for us. We have 4 levels of inward investment, and not to go on too long with this, but project-based is a funded activity. Ad hoc and of scale is something that I might pick up at the moment, is the Te Aupiti Gorge stuff and potentially looking at a hotel for the region. Ad hoc and not of scale is the smaller stuff that comes through our business team through engagement with businesses around the region. And finally, it's third-party contracted, which is what we do with places like Sprout and the factory. So there's lots of stuff going on. And as I said earlier, it's often a long game. So it relies on those growth poles, those really big, anchor projects, to steal a Christchurch phrase, that are going to really drive economic development in the region. So we've talked earlier about how Te Tanganui could help the Kawakawa Industrial Precinct. Absolutely, the food strategy, when it gets finished, I'm hoping it's going to be December, will allow us to identify where the growth inward investment opportunities will be for this region as well. So there's lots going on in that space, and we just need to hang tight sometimes because it's not an immediate win. It just takes a little bit of finessing getting through. Another big one for the region was leveraging the Manfield opportunity. And so we've been doing quite a bit in this space. So we've been making sure that we promote Manfield as an option for anybody that comes through to us and might be looking to either run an event or have some kind of business in there, and I'll talk about one of those in a minute. We profile this site to our regional website. We pass on any leads to this organisation, which is really great. So just recently we had a lead with a local company called Kahui EV. And Kahui EV was passed on to us by NZTE. So they've done due diligence through NZTE. We had a meeting with them. They were wedded on doing business in the city. I saw the link between electric cars and having a racetrack, and so talked and said, look, I think you need to get on an e-scooter and go out to Manfield. And so that discussion was had, and I don't know where it's landing, but we're following that with Kathy at the moment, so that's really cool. We've been looking at making sure that, because we have the relationship with PNCC around there, they pick up their side of the city marketing, but making sure that on the back of any interactions they have where there's not a fit with the city, that they pass it on to us for us to pass on to Manfield. The business team from CEDA visited out to Manfield at the end of last month. We helped subsidise an exhibitor stand for the National Driver Training Centre at the recent Careers Expo, so we're giving them a good leg up to get some profile in there. And I have regular meetings in my diary now with Kathy, which is fantastic. So we're doing lots of good stuff out in that space. Regional identity, as I just talked about earlier, just keeps pushing on. The Manawatū NZ website, and they still refer to it as new, but it's been around for quite a while. Don't forget that is a regional brand. It's owned by the region. It's not a CEDA brand. It's not a city brand. It's not a Manawatū District Council brand. It's a regional brand. So we've all got skin in the game in this one. And we're really doing a lot to keep that website current. At this meeting I was at yesterday, a guy who works in Gisborne just went on and on and on and on about how that website's fantastic, and he's taken it back to his EDA and said, get something like this going because it's really working the Oracle. So there's lots of stuff going on in there, lots of collateral coming out. We're doing a lot of video and photography projects which involve some of the local companies here, which are being put up on the website to profile how we do things in the Manawatū. Just quickly, a couple of slides to go. The talent and skills pipeline, as I talked about earlier, it's a really big challenge for us, with the headwinds we talked about earlier. So we're doing a lot of work to profile our priority sectors. The Careers Expo this year, you may not be aware, but it used to be the old Sorted Expo, but we've now outsourced that. Our key reason for being is not events, but we got the New Zealand Careers Expo team to run that. I thought it was a rip-roaring success. I think we had 65 exhibitors and over 2,000 students went through there. So it was really, really good. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the Accelerate Academy partnership, which I can send you some information on that. I'm just mindful of time. The Manawatū Leaders Program is still going quite well. We're just looking at how that might be able to go better. And there's lots of stuff going on in terms of the 5 squadron relocation work. So we've got a specific website for that we deal with one of the Manawatū Chambers special interest groups. Just quickly, we've got some stuff coming up, just keeping our relationship with Immigration New Zealand really tight, because we want to think about how we might be able to influence skill shortages and the borders opening up to people that we need in the region. There's been a lot of work in the agri-tech sector talent space. The new polytech structure and the workforce development councils and the regional skills leadership groups and our local skills and talent advisory group are now all working really, really well together. So that's fantastic. And we've got a lot of upcoming engagement, particularly in the space of, primary industries and workforce, and with the Manawatū Māori Business Network, which has got a good lead based out here in the region. So that's us. I hope I didn't take too much time. I think you said I had between 20 minutes and 4 hours, so hopefully I've got the sweet spot there for you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you so much. That's great, taking us through. There's a lot going on. The question I had in relation to the Manawatū brand, where are we at with a refresh of all of the signage?
Yes.
The signage around Manawatū district is tired, it's out of date. It looks sad, it looks like no one cares. Where are we at with that?
Yep, so there is a little bit here on the signage. So Janet's just advised me a couple of days ago that there's the conversations we picked up again with the Manawatū district around what that signage might look like. So that is being worked on at the moment with entry into the regions at specific points. The new signage sits on State Highway 1 in Sanson, currently at Viv's Kitchen, and at the Wairika Honey Centre. So that work's ongoing. So I can take back to Janet just to keep that moving on.
It's just those welcome
to signs. Absolutely.
Are we going to have them? What should they look like? But they should also, if we are going to have them, have the new branding.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you very much. Probably a Palmerston North centric question, and if it was a joint presentation, it might have been in there. How is the tertiary institutions doing with, do you think we'll get the international students back? Is it recoverable? I guess, when the whole world was in lockdown, if you were studying online, it's just as easy to study at a top university rather than a regional one at the bottom of the Pacific. And particularly, I haven't heard anything recently about IPC. How are they managing under the current climate?
So I've got an interview at 8:15 tomorrow morning on that very question. So I'm not sure which paper will be in, but I'll let you know. So I've come from the polytech sector, so I've left that to come to this role. And I think the international student is, I think, going to bounce back, but it's going to take time. So with the borders reopening recently, most degree programs don't have a mid-semester intake, so there's no July intake. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a delay, I think, in coming back to business as usual. The other thing about that is that New Zealand has not fared well in international perceptions because it's been so late coming back to market, which is just a border reopening thing. I've had a bit to do with the leader out at IPU, and IPU are in a very I guess, interesting position at the moment, but I think what they're looking for is for that border reopening to give them impetus into February. But the polytech sector, with the new polytech emergence coming up on January 1, they seem to be very, very comfortable and things are moving ahead. And I've just noticed recently that the branding for T-Ball Kangaroo is starting to push the UCOL brand to the side a wee bit. So eventually that's going to be a challenge, I think, for the region, just to make sure that people know that we're still a regional tertiary provider in that vocational space.
Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby and Jerry. Going back to the distribution hub and whatever we now call the regional freight ring road, it changes name every couple of months. And it's, I can't remember now. But in respect to what's in it for us, if you like, you've mentioned the benefit to the Kawakawa industrial precinct. We also have the Riverside industrial precinct, which is smaller. The Kawakawa one is certainly the growth one and the one that we want to focus on mainly. But don't forget the Riverside one. The one that often gets forgotten, particularly when we're talking to the city, is the various road links between Fielding and Palmerston North. They are really busy, as I'm sure you know. The numbers are really impressive. We sort of have a number of narrow roads, so there are a few options, which is good, but they are narrow, and we've always felt that an improved roading link. We used to talk about a super highway. I'm not sure if we actually need a super highway, but certainly improvements in the road links as part of the whole distribution hub. I'll call it Regional Freight Ring Road because I've forgotten the new name. Yeah. So I just like that to be kept in, just keep in focus. So there's the commercial traffic. There's a huge amount of commuter traffic as well, both ways.
Thank you for that. And I did notice this morning as I came through, I was looking at the traffic going that way, the traffic going this way, and it just made me think about, it would be great to get up-to-date figures on where the people in the district work. And I think the ring road or the integrated transport plan will, I think, deliver benefits going north or out this way as well from the ring road, which will do that connection. And that's all part of just keeping that narrative covered.
That's just to keep it in mind.
Absolutely.
It's an important focus for us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, Jerry, I had a couple of things, probably three. I have a little bit more cynicism than you probably over the ability of the merged polytech sector to actually meet local demand and meet the requirements of local communities. Information would tell me that what was a $48 million problem through the merger has created another 139 bureaucrats and is now a $120 million problem. So I think one of the focuses, as Councillor Short says, is, is an interaction with our tertiary institutions or the vocational tertiary institutions at a local level is actually may require a hell of a lot more effort than it would do otherwise. So a couple of other things around food strategy and growth. I read an article the other day somewhere that basically said that our global food storage capacity is as bad as it's been in many, many years. And I think probably a difficult thing, it's more of an observation really than a question, Jerry, I guess, is that, our ability to produce food and increase food production in a sustainable way in New Zealand is significantly important. And I fear that, currently our farmers and growers are being legislated out of production. And I'm sure that part of your food strategy is to actually do that. But the other thing around the 5 squadron relocation in terms of skills, our skills shortages that we currently got, clearly we're getting some fairly skilled people coming that are employed by the Air Force. But I would imagine, and I wonder if you've done any work around ascertaining the skills, talent, and partners and family that's actually coming with those people, and what impact that might have on our schools shortages. 200 families is actually significant.
Absolutely. So look, in a sense, back to your first comment, in a sense, that's why I'm sitting in this role, not the polytech sector anymore.
Well done.
Look, I think the comments around the 5 squadron is really, really cool because, and this is another great link to the polytech sector actually, the polytech's got an arrangement with the armed forces, all 3 parts of the armed forces, where they provide scholarships for, I think it's up to 20 people to do degrees at polytech while they're doing their military service, but it's open to spouses as well. And so one of the things in terms of the website that CEDA hosts for that squadron to move in here is information around, making links for those spouses and others to be able to look at what sort of jobs they can do when they get here. So I think that's really, really neat.
I know in the past, Grant, that it's been one of the reasons it's also been a bit of a hold up in it happening, because we do have so many more 2 working family members now than in our parents' generation, shall we say. And so where you've then got, say, the armed force person wanting to come down, but their partner saying, well, where can I work when I get there? So It's not that we don't have jobs, but we might not have jobs for a head radiographer, because we've already got, because we have less of them here. So it's about also matching up that we have the right level of opportunities for some of those partners as well.
Councillor Belsey.
Thank you for the opportunity. On the food strategy, are you alarmed at the good protein country that's going into pine trees for carbon credits? And we are in a unique position in New Zealand to have grass fed and really unique. These grain fed farmers out in the world are really struggling to pay for the grain, and we've got to make like the middle of winter and we're growing grass, and it's really concerning that good farmland is breaking the Paris Agreement, that we would not put trees in where there was protein growing. And it is a huge concern. I just wondered if you have any leverage in convincing government to say, hey, back off.
I certainly share the concern. I had a conversation the other day when I was down at Tekapo, funny enough, with a farmer who could get 3 times the income from turning his acreage into trees and leasing it to another farmer to raise sheep. And I thought that's ridiculous. So I share that concern. We'll keep pushing it. We've got a meeting actually on Tuesday with the lead team. We've got Lane Yeager coming. He used to be the CEO of Zespri. He's now with the Whakaaro Nui, I think it is, which is the New Zealand Primary Industry Sector think tank, which is a government quango. And I think one of the challenges is how we do the traditional farming in a better way and not just run over the top of everything that's different. So we've got to be able to find a way to match new skills, new technology, new opportunities with, doing the traditional agricultural production in a way that has to meet all of those standards that seem to be just getting more and more and more and more. So we'll keep advocating on that for the region, absolutely.
And of course, within that, there's the balance that you've got, that we produce far more than what New Zealand can eat. And so much of it is exported, which that higher price value is great for there, but not for our New Zealanders who are trying to also buy food that's affordable. So it's great that we're producing lamb that's sold at whatever, however many dollars a kilo, and then, so many Kiwis saying we can't afford to have lamb. So it's finding that balance of affordable food that's sustainable and good quality, but also then for the export market.
Well, I just said, there are comments from people saying they can buy our lamb cheaper in Britain than they can here, and milk products. And so there's quite a...
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you. We're up to speed. It's really good to see this, and I really need you to come in, on a regular basis to do this, so to share it with all of us. And then the work that we do at the lead team is really just adding a bit more detail around some of those things that are topical. So thank you to both of you and to the rest of the team at CEDA and to the board. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Right, we're moving to item 8, notification of late items, and we do have a late item today. The following item of late business was notified for consideration, being the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting remits. The purpose of the item was to seek Council's direction for voting on the 6 remits being considered at the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting at the end of July 2022. And the reason that the item was not included on the agenda for the meeting is as it was not available and missed the deadline for inclusion into the agenda. And the consideration of the item cannot be delayed until a later council meeting due to the need to seek council's direction prior to the LGNZ AGM. So with that, I'll move that the item remits to the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting be accepted as a late item of business. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
Your worship, are you able to take a comment on that before we vote? Haven't had a chance to read these, your worship. A bit difficult to make a decision. Will we just pause for a moment to have a read through, case by case?
We're just tabling this as a late item, and we will come back to it as item 12.
Thank you, your worship.
And then there is there's a really good summary as well, and we will go through each one.
Excellent, that's encouraging. Thank you.
thing. So, but also remember that we do have an item on our agenda in regards to our membership
Yes,
for
we do.
LGNZ.
Yes, we do.
So again, the decision, whatever comes out of that discussion will
Yeah.
impact the need of, you know, if we're not members of LGNZ,
Yeah.
we don't need to think about rents.
Oh, no, I completely understand that.
But it is really important that we cover all this off today so that we meet the timeframes to have a say.
Oh, I completely appreciate that. Just have to note that, yeah, of the very short time frame to absorb information.
Thank you. They are pretty straightforward, the 6 remits, and the summary is very good. So I have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Marsh.
Actually, put that motion, and then if you can come back to me, that would be good. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So a mover and a seconder, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
With that then, I'd like to move a motion that the order of business be modified to have 11.7 discussed and approved in whichever order prior to 11.6's discussion. Because your comment then around the late item going to point 12, in my view, we need to have or remain members of LGNZ, and I'll be voting accordingly to that. But given the strong viewpoints already expressed on the 2nd of June meeting by colleagues around the table, that they had no confidence or support of LGNZ, and yet our current membership that lapsed on the 31st of March, I wonder with 11.6 why we've highlighted 11 points of support to LGNZ within that submission document, and yet we don't know whether we're actually going to be a member of LGNZ or not. So in my view, 11.6 needs to come after our vote on 11.7.
You don't need a motion, and the chair has the ability to be able to shift the order of business around, understanding orders, so there's no motion, and I don't think we could anyway, so.
Thank you.
Don't think we could.
Just have a motion from the floor,
Right.
along in those regards.
Then can I ask that 11.7 be brought forward?
Thank you, and it does make sense because ultimately the decision around 11.7 impacts on not just our late item, but as you say, 11.6. So I'm happy to do that. Right, so we've done that. Item 9, no recommendations from other committees. Item 10, we're on page 11. This, for your information, is the minutes from our last joint strategic planning committee. You have those in front of you. Are there any questions or comments? I guess the only point I'd like to make is that we agreed at this meeting for our teams to go away and do a bit of work based on the workshop discussion we had on what the future for this committee should look like and how do we better utilise the time with the joint councils together, and whether there's potential to expand to include other neighbouring councils. So that report will be coming back to it at our next meeting. We have one more meeting at the end of this triennium. So that will help set some direction for the new council. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hadfield.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I apologise because I'm a little bit confused. I must have eaten too much last night. 11.6. The way I read 11.6 has no relevance to 11.7 at all. 11.6 is around actually submissions we're making on behalf of our community and central government.
Through LGNZ. Yeah.
That submission has already been lodged, so it is to get it recorded through a formal council process.
Correct. So I don't see the relevance to the tie-up between 11.3 and 11.6 and 11.7.
That's already been lodged. So it doesn't, it's not.
Right, so I'm not actually confused at all. Thank you for clearing that up.
When you read the recommendation, it is to receive. Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Again, it just seems to me that we're having our cake and trying to eat it as well. And the fact that here we were supporting LGNZ's submission, and yet at the moment we are not members of LGNZ. Our membership finished on the 31st of March. We're still discussing whether we're going to become a member for this next financial year. which started on the 1st of April. So how can we support submissions by LGNZ when we're not even a member?
If I may, Your Worship, just to make sure that I don't remain confused, is that the purpose of what council decided in terms of actually looking at submissions is that one of in the terms of reference on the submissions working group was actually, where appropriate, supporting any submission from any organisation, whether that was Federated Farmers, Action Network, Local Government New Zealand, whomever. And all I see is that this is actually a process that's clearly outlined in the terms of reference for the submissions working group. And as in those terms of reference, we are reporting, advising council, because the working group has made a submission. And in this case, it just happens to be that we're supporting the submission that local government have made. It may equally just as well be a submission that Federated Farmers have made. So I again, unless I'm actually still confused, I don't see the relevance.
Thank you. Right, so let's continue then with, we're on item 11, Officers' Report on page 16. This is seeking the adoption of our draft smoke and vape-free policy 2022. So, welcome. So we have the information there, we have the draft policy, and you're welcome to highlight anything there and make any questions.
Thank you, Worship. I'd just like to acknowledge Georgia, who actually wrote the report and the policy before she left. And as you're aware, the policy was developed at the request of council. It states council's position on smoking and vaping in the community and aims to reinforce the social norms around that, and also to send a message to the community that we support smoke-free, the smoke-free Aotearoa approach. The approach that we're suggesting that we take is more about education rather than, a punitive approach. And if it is adopted today, the signage for the smoke-free policy will be rolled out across the different parks and reserves and playgrounds and some facilities as well. And that would be done over time as budget allows. The Cancer Society were keen to come today to present to council, but given that council has already had presentations from the Cancer Society and other agencies, we felt that that was probably not necessary. And the only thing I'd probably point out is that we, two things. One is that in the policy it says that we'll work with the council controlled organisations around adopting similar policies, and the majority of the ones that we've spoken to so far have a policy in place already. And the other point that I would make is that the Cancer Society has made us aware that there is 3 councils in New Zealand that currently don't have a policy, us being one of them. And the other 2 councils, they said, were taking the same approach we were to develop and adopt one. So that is probably the only thing, the points to raise.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I do recall conversations we had previously around this, which, so I want to highlight something that I find confusing on page 23. We say under 3.9 that council will take an educational rather than an enforcement approach. Totally support that. So therefore, why are we, and I thought we had discussed this previously, so why are we saying in 3.7 and 3.8 that council run or supported events or funded by council have to be promoted as smoke-free? Because I remember we discussed the logic around that. You run a Christmas parade which receives some funding from council by the ratepayers. How on earth are those event organisers going to manage that as a smoke-free event? The reality of being able to do it, it's fair enough to put the logo or something on your poster,
That's what it's
But,
required.
you know, is that all we're asking them to do? Because there seems to be a bit of a conflict between 3.9 and the previous two.
That is exactly what you've described. It's more about actually showing that council run events actually do comply with legislation.
Smoke events. So the conversation was, we all realised that trying to enforce this, you can't. Best we can do is have a policy that encourages those events that are supported by council to advertise that they are smoke-free events. Some smokes, none's going to actually do much, but at least we're trying to encourage the smoke-free environment. And it might be confused me when we look at the wording, but that's really what it's trying to say. We're certainly not going to have any smoke events. And I think we well canvassed that when we had discussions with smoke policy.
And I think what you're saying is maybe the word required is because we're saying they are required to meet smoke-free criteria. And if we're saying it's just not realistic to be able to do that, yes, actively promote that we want it to be, but require them to meet the criteria.
So the criteria, the smoke-free criteria actually says that it's not about enforcement, it's actually about
Promotion.
Promotion. So that's what that refers to.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Headfield.
Yeah, well, perhaps there we should say encouraged rather than required. And look on the whole, I think I find it quite frustrating that council is engaging a policy that actually is really in effect got no teeth at all. In a way, in my view, it actually it doesn't help the areas where we have bylaws that have enforcement available. To me, it softens the rigidity and the effectiveness of actually of enforcement. That's only my view. However, I will say that on the whole, it's a pretty pragmatic sort of document, and I think that's probably the best we can do in the circumstance of yet again being required by central government to actually enact more whatever you like to call it from Wellington, with no resourcing to do any of this. And it is a constant frustration, as I'm sure you're aware of mine, that we continue to get lumbered with central government policy. I'm not saying that as an ex-smoker, gave up when I was 23 years old. Packet of cigarettes was 39 cents, goodness me. But
Showing your age.
What's that?
Showing your age.
Oh, thank you, Alison. You know, it is pragmatic. The only question I've got is around bus shelters, actually. Do Horizons have a policy? And are bus shelters covered by Horizons policy?
I know that Horizons have a policy. I couldn't tell you whether it actually covers
it. Actually doesn't really matter, does it? Because at the end of the day, they'll have no enforcement either. So yeah, look on the whole, I needed to make the comment about central government again abdicating the responsibilities to local government who they're trying to destroy, and I note the good work done in producing a very pragmatic document. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It's very pleasing to see this finally come to the table. My recollection is probably that it came through Manawatū, and we've been discussing it for 5 or 6 years. They all came up with policies around their marae, and then Kerry from the Cancer Society was invited in, and she was probably attending once a year to ask us to please hurry up and adopt this. So I presume it's Kerry you've probably been talking with. So, and around the signage on events and things like that, one of the things Kerry said there's proof of around the country is if you have smoke-free event or signs at sports parks and wherever, actually the community take ownership of it. So sometimes, you know, say for instance, someone watching a kid's rugby game with vaping on the side, someone else would say, oh, excuse me, but did you realise this is a smoke-free sports field? Do you mind not doing that? And actually, it's surprising how many community members will sort of take up the self-police, I suppose is the right word. And I'd actually be really happy to move the motion unless there's any further discussion. Right, okay. that the council adopts the smoke and vape-free policy 2022 as set out in Appendix 1 of the report of the General Manager, Community, dated 15 March 2022.
Thank you. Have a mover. Councillor Casey seconded that. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Lynn. We move to page 24, 11.2. This is approval to publicly notify a new explanatory bylaw 2022. And you have the information here. Kathy, are you going to take us through? Oh, Lisa's here as well. So welcome, Lisa. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, sorry I'm at home. I've got a sniffle and a cough, so I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you.
Morning, Your Worship, councillors.
That chair is very low.
So as has already been introduced, my purpose of being here today is to take you through the draft explanatory bylaw, and we're seeking approval to publicly notify that. The explanatory bylaw expired in November 2021, so this is a new bylaw that will replace that expired bylaw. It's administrative in nature. It's relevant to all of the council's other bylaws. So it includes definitions as well as processes and powers that are common to the bylaws. Given its technical and administrative, I don't expect it to be of particular interest to the public, but because of its overarching nature, it does trigger the requirement to consult using the special consultative procedure in the Local Government Act 2002. So there's a couple of parts that we need to do. So the first, it relates to section 1551 of the Local Government Act that requires before making or amending a bylaw, council must determine that it's the most appropriate way of addressing the perceived problems. The assessment against section 1551 is detailed in section 5 of my report and is attached as Annex A to the report. Section 1552 of the Act requires that council also determine whether the proposed bylaw is the most appropriate form of the bylaw. That determination cannot be fully made until council has deliberated on the draft bylaw and it's finalised for adoption. So the report includes an initial assessment against section 1552 and section 6 of the report. The Act also requires an assessment of whether the bylaw gives rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990. An initial assessment is included in section 7 of my report, and the recommendations relating to this assessment will be included at the time the bylaw is presented to council for adoption. The second decision sought in my report is approval to publicly notify. You'll note that recommendation 3 of the report delegates authority to the Chief Executive to approve any minor amendments to the draft, any consequential amendments to other council bylaws, or the statement of proposal that are considered appropriate prior to consultation commencing. As well as updates to remove redundant definitions, there are 4 key differences between the draft bylaw and the 2014 version of it that are listed in paragraph 1.3 of my report and in the statement of proposal as follows. The first is an amendment to the definition of animal. The definition in the 2014 bylaw specifically excluded dogs and people. We're looking at removing the exclusion of dogs so that dogs are captured as an animal across all the bylaws. The second is the deletion of clauses that duplicate legislation. The third is the deletion of clauses that relating to licenses, permits, consents and approvals that duplicate equivalent clauses in council's other bylaws. And the fourth is amendments to clauses that relate to the repair or removal of works constructed contrary to a bylaw to ensure consistency with sections 163 to 168 of the Local Government Act 2002. All of the differences between the 2014 bylaw and the draft bylaw are described in Table 1 and the Appendix 1 of the Statement of Proposal document in Annex B, and that table also includes reasons for those differences. Table 2 in Appendix 1 sets out minor changes to council's other bylaws that are as a direct consequence of the new explanatory bylaw. So those are mostly definitions that have been that are either not capitalised in the other bylaws, which denotes a defined term. So it's kind of, you know, taking this opportunity to fix some errors or minor corrections. And it's also to ensure that all references to the explanatory bylaw are updated to refer to the 2022 version and not the 2014 version, and updates to clause references because of those changes to the explanatory bylaw. Table 3 and Appendix 3 of the Statement of Proposal sets out some proposed changes to clause 5.2 in the Public Places Bylaw 2020. And those changes are as a result of the amendments to the definition of animal that I mentioned earlier. And they relate to key change 1 about dogs. Without these changes, there could be some duplication between this bylaw and the dog control bylaw in relation to wandering dogs and the control of dogs in public places. The dog control bylaw already includes a requirement that dogs are kept under control at all times in public places, and wandering dogs are addressed in Council's dog control bylaw and in the dog control policy, and Council already has authority under the Impounding Act to impound wandering dogs. So there's no need to duplicate those controls within the public places bylaw. The amendments will effectively exclude dogs from those controls to maintain the status quo. Our external legal advisor has reviewed our proposed changes and is satisfied that they are minor and don't trigger the requirement to consult. However, as they are as a consequence of the explanatory bylaw, we've included them in the Statement of Proposal for transparency and completeness. So if Council approves the draft bylaw for public consultation today, subject to any changes that are agreed at this meeting, it's my intention to publicly notify the draft bylaw on the 14th of July. And that will be done via a public notice on Council's website and in the Fielding Rangatiki Herald. I'll also put copies of the documents available in the front foyer and at the library and on Council's website on the Have Your Say page. The consultation period is scheduled from the 14th of July until the 15th of August. A hearing is scheduled for the 1st of September, deliberations for the 15th of September and adoption at the 6th of October Council meeting. So now welcome any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Very comprehensive. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Hadfield.
Well, just a comment really, Lisa. I admire your dedication to the detail of a behemoth sort of bit of information. I think you're right. The public will struggle to be scintillated by. So exceptionally well done. I to be honest, I struggled reading through it to find anything that I could actually make a comment on, or ask a question about. So well done. I think that's, it's a significant bit of work that I guess is just background detail, as you say. It's more administrative. Yeah. So well done.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just very quickly, Lisa, is there thinking about our community committees, is there something that we can take along that's a shortened, condensed version for the sake of this council's ability to get across what needs to be got across? Just something for consideration for our community committees, given the level of impact on our rural committees as well. So.
Through your worship, I have prepared a summary for our front of house staff, so I could look at taking that and modifying that for that purpose. If you don't mind, that'd be greatly appreciated.
That would be great. Thank you. If we could circulate that to the
So just councillors, a bit of background. The explanatory bylaw was introduced through the last review of bylaws, and the purpose of it was to cut out the duplication that existed in each bylaw. So prior to that, every bylaw had its own definitions, had its own information in that bylaw that was contained in all bylaws. So we took it all out and put it into the explanatory bylaw, so we didn't have to replicate it. And what happened is, prior to us doing this, when one bylaw changed, when we changed something, it got out of sync with all the other bylaws.
Right.
So from an administrative perspective, it was a nightmare. So this is bringing all of those administrative matters that sit across all the bylaws into one place. So
that's actually a very simple explanation. Your worship, I'm happy to move if there's no further discussion. Do you want me to read it all out? Happy to. That the council receives the report of the general manager dated the 9th of June 2022 and Annex A to this report, and determines, pursuant to section 155(1) of the Local Government Act 2002, that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the perceived problems identified in the explanatory bylaw. 2, that the council approves the statement of proposal that includes the draft explanatory bylaw 2022, as well as details of minor consequential amendments to council's operative bylaws, table 2 in appendix 1 and table 3 in appendix 3, and annex B of the report of the general manager dated the 9th of June 2022, for public consultation in accordance with section 83 and 86 of the Local Government Act 2002. And I do note, I would like to make a slight change to the wording of recommendation 3, and I'll explain why. That the council delegates to the chief executive the power to approve any minor amendments to the draft bylaw or minor consequential changes to other council bylaws with a statement of proposal. And it says here that they, and I consider the chief executive to be a he, if I can, or the statement of proposal that he considers appropriate prior to consultation start.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations?
Yeah, happy to second that, noting that minor.
Thank you. No further discussion. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motions are carried. Thank you.
I do beg your pardon.
He might have wanted to do non-binary.
Let's not start that.
Yeah, let's not get
Let's
into
not
that
start that.
conversation. Right, this is a good time to take a break for morning tea, please. If we can be back here at 25 past.
I was about to say,
Yes, Ellie did.
Right, we'll call our meeting to order, and we are now on page 77, 11.3. This is for our information, the minutes from our Youth Council and Community Committee minutes. Don't intend to go through them individually in detail, other than a comment, if required, from the liaison councillor from each one. Councillor G Taylor, she's not to come back. Councillor Casey, is there anything in the Youth Council?
No, continuing to plan well, and probably from today heads up potential move into red light, just anticipating that in regards to our colour run coming up and youth achievement awards as well, just to be on the radar with that, but no significant additions, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Quick question, if I may, Your Worship. Where do you get your paint from for the colour up?
Just Google it online. There's a company that sell it in bulk.
It's quite expensive.
Bloody expensive.
Storage.
We've got it in storage anyway from last year.
Cool.
Yeah. Are you wanting it for storage?
Yeah, I wanted, yeah. Thank you.
Answer your question.
Not really, no, but that's fine. I'll just continue to pay that.
Someone around here knows. Someone around here.
Bloody colour run.
Talk to Mark O'Donnell.
The next one is how come Councillor Campbell's not here today? They have had a meeting this week since this one. So we'll move on from that one. We're here with Councillor Ford.
Just good to see them back up and running again after a bit of a break. So they're going to have 3 month, just like 3 monthly meetings.
Yep, good to have them back. Rua Taikaria, see Councillor Hadfield, you were absent, but Councillor Quarry and myself were there. Is there anything from that meeting, Councillor Quarry? No. No, it's really good to see that they had a really good turnout. They're keen and fired up, which is great.
They've got a very strong community spirit there, and yeah.
Excellent. Pahongana, Councillor Marsh.
Nothing really in the minutes of note that need to bring forward, other than the fact of, I think you've had another meeting with number 4 line, if you want to give us an update on that.
Correct, yes. Infrastructure Manager Hamish and myself had a meeting on a very cold day at the corner of the road with residents from the road. It was a very good meeting. The residents in turn took us through their concerns. We actually experienced a local Powerco ute hearing up the road while we were there and flagged him down, and someone said, for heaven's sake, slow down, and his answer was, why, it's 100k, isn't it? So that was a valid point, speed limit. So we've taken notes, we've written a report, and Hamish's team is working on it. We've advised the residents that we're going back with some costings, some potential solutions, and we've said that we would do that in about a month. So that's where we're at, which is good. Thanks, and Councillor Quarry.
No, things are pretty good. A few little minor grizzles, but they're
Thank you.
Concerned about.
Right, so that brings us to the end of those minutes. On page 77, there is a recommendation there that I'm happy to move that the council receives the minutes of the community committees and the Manawatū Youth Council meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to page 104. These are our Lagoima requests for June, for May through to current. We have Brent White here with us today. Brent's our acting information manager. So all the hard questions go to Brent. Thank you. So you have the Lagoima requests for that period of time. The details are there. Is there anything you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, well, one thing I think so recently myself and the team took over the responsibility for the Lagoima at the start of the year, so made some significant improvements, but along the way we did uncover some irregularities and have since fixed them. What happened was we had 3 separate complaints via the Ombudsman's office. 2 of those have now been resolved, and the other one will be resolved this afternoon. So turned out that I think procedurally we were probably a little bit, in my team, a little bit remiss in making sure that some of the things went out. So we took the word of somebody else and said, oh, you're going to send the email yet, and of course it never happened. So we've improved that process, and it's all looking pretty good now. So Ombudsman's office was very happy with the way we dealt with it.
Excellent, well done. So let's open it up for questions or comments in relation to those requests. Councillor Corey.
Thank you. 2.7, the Lagoima with regard to the nursery. What's happened there?
It was actually one of the Lagoima complaints, and there was a discussion at the time about whether the document that went out, which was a PowerPoint, was actually in fact a report. And we considered it not to be a report at the time, and which actually was true. But of course, that's not the position that the person requesting the information took, and so there was a little bit of discussion around it. By the time it got resolved, the information wasn't nearly, I guess, as sensitive as it was, and so it was released with the approval of Shane and Co, and everyone was pretty happy.
Excellent, thank you. Any otherwise it's self-explanatory. Councillor.
A couple of points from me. Just a confirmation or a just an understanding. Is Josh Marshall the same as Joshua Marshall? Or are they 2 separate?
I'm not sure. I did deal personally with Josh Marshall though, and that was another one of the 3. So the 2 that we've just talked about are the 2 that have been resolved with the Ombudsman's office.
Yep. And then the second question to that, which relates back to our heads of agreement, which was signed and brought through council for joining the Communities for Local Democracy. That is, from my recall, is the only paper that was brought forward about our membership, in which case the response to Josh Marshall, where it stipulates that the council was unanimous, I had actually abstained from that vote. So it wasn't unanimous.
Thank you.
You wish for me? Yeah, quick question. Just in regards to Mr. John Key's fairly close, at times microscopic view of the council. Just some reassurance that we are meeting our obligations because he will continue to hold us to account in the way that he does. That's his approach. Are we okay in this space?
I'm going to give council a briefing this afternoon. Yes.
Understood.
For a number of reasons.
Thank you, Shane.
Just with regarding that, so that's the third complaint, and it's also the one that I'm going to be closing out this afternoon. So
yeah.
Thank you. We'll get an update on that later. Councillor Marsh.
Just going back to the comment that I made, can we actually change that? I know it will be, that's already been sent to Joshua Marshall or Josh Marshall, but can we change that in our meetings, in our meeting notes?
This is what was sent. What we can do is send Josh Marshall an update saying the information we gave wasn't right. This was actually what.
Can we process that, please? Good.
Thank you. Nothing further. That being the case, there is a motion on page 104. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please.
happy to move, Your Worship. As I find page 104. That the report detailing the request for information received under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 from 6th of May to the 22nd of June 2022 be received.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. To page 116, this is the application of seal. This is for our information, the schedule of sealed documents that have been dealt with and seeking council to receive them. Are there any questions or comments in relation to that? No? Great. So there is a recommendation there on page 116.
So move.
Councillor Marsh moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Belsky. Any further comments? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Right, 11.6, and we're on page 119. And as mentioned before, this is to formally record the submission that has already been made as part of the work that the submissions working group has done. And it's just to receive and note that it has been lodged. Any questions, comments, Councillor Hadfield?
Just happy to move, Your Worship, that the council receives and notes the submissions lodged on behalf of the Manawatū District Council as outlined in the report of General Manager Corporate dated 22nd June 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Short. Seconded. Any discussion, comments? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. So that brings us to page 129. And this is following on the discussion around Manawatū District Council's membership for Local Government New Zealand. As you will recall, we made the decision to offer our membership with a reduced fee, excluding the cost to join Communities for Local Democracy. That culminated in a face-to-face discussion with the LGNZ president and CE. It was a good discussion. We had a free and frank discussion, and from that discussion, the letter was received back to council that membership was only a fully paid up membership was the only way that the Constitution allowed us to be a member of LGNZ. So this report has come back to us for us to have a look at, given where we've got to with this, for us to make a decision about whether we wish to change our decision and continue our membership. Our CE has put a report together there of the implications on if we're not members. Is there anything else you want to highlight there? Thank you.
Councillors, just in conjunction with my report, there's a couple of other things that have probably surfaced that I've heard about post that. And one is a comment that we don't really need to be a member of LGNZ because we are a member of Taitura, which is the old Society of Local Government Managers. The council is not a member of Taitura. Taitura is an organisation that is membership for managers, or local government managers. The council is not a member, nor are elected members. Elected members cannot join Taitura. It deals in a number of facets of local government, but mainly those that impact on the operational side, although they do comment in national policy. One of the areas that they're not working in, that is the sole domain of local government New Zealand, is the Resource Management Act reforms. The RMA reforms are being worked on by the Ministry for Environment and Local Government New Zealand. The steering group is a Local Government New Zealand steering group. We had steering group chair and MFE here to update the Mayor and I on where those reforms are going. It is solely through LGNZ. If we are not a member of LGNZ, we will not be participating in the local RMA reforms. We will simply be cut off from the steering group and from where that's going. Now that steering group, I get the disquiet and the disappointment around the three waters, absolutely, and I understand where council's at. The RMA reforms are the complete reverse. The way LGNZ is working with the Ministry for Environment and the Minister David Parker is absolutely in reverse of the three waters. Chalk and cheese. And an example of that is the sector, the Local Government New Zealand, went to the minister and said, what is proposed for the RMA reforms doesn't reflect local input. So they formed a working party through Local Government New Zealand, and Toby Adams chaired it, the Mayor of Hauraki, and the working party made some recommendations to the minister, and the local component, in other words, you have a regional spatial planning framework, is now part of the RMA reform framework. And I'm really concerned that we will miss out on having any input into those reforms, given how focused it is through local government. That's one bit. The second thing is I spoke to Susan Freeman-Green yesterday around local government New Zealand, and there are a number of councils who, like us, put forward the same proposal we did around a reduced membership. All other councils, apart from us, have now paid the membership. They all got visited by the President and CE, and they've all now said, or have all but two have paid the membership, the other two have said they are paying. So
does that include Timaru?
Timaru's out. Timaru withdrew being a member of LGNZ.
I thought they could come in at any time.
They can, but
not yet.
Well, no, that's not quite right either. I'll get on to that.
Okay.
So I just thought that was relevant because there were quite a number of councils that followed out, especially in the C4LG space. In terms of rejoining LGNZ, it's just not a matter of rocking up with a chicken pump. It's you actually have to go through the National Council and they will accept you as a member and then you can pay your membership. So I clarified that through Susan as well. I normally asked Susan to send through that value proposition that is in appendices to the report, just trying to give you some idea of the breadth of work that LGNZ does actually work out. And you've seen the submissions area and the policy work they do, which is, I think, on par with what Taitura does. And now with Grace and their team leading that policy team, they revamped it, and it's really producing some good stuff. From an operations perspective, that's gold for Lisa and the team to work with, because if we don't get that stuff, that means we have to go and do all the research, we have to resource it, and we have to find out all the information ourselves, which is going to add a lot. I doubt I could resource it. And as well as the up and coming election information, I've had a look when I was at Rural Provincial. We got shown by LTNZ the revamped mayors and elected members induction programs, substantial. It's been completely redone, and it is a very good program that Bridget and the team there have put together. Well, if we're not a member, we miss it. Simply don't work so out. And we will have new councillors around the table, at least 3, and they won't qualify for that. Simple as that. So I think withdrawing from LGNZ now, I think we've made a very good point. The meeting's been there, would make it difficult for me and my team to deliver a lot, especially in that reforms-based council. And actually, if we do, then I'm probably going to have to write to council reform, and I'm going to have difficulties performing some of those functions. So I don't want to get the wrong impression here, but I have to put it on the table that it will inhibit me and my team operation, if we know what I mean. Given that a lot of the stuff is not coming through tied to it, especially RMA reforms. That reform is massive. 7 to 10 years that reform will take. So anyway, I've just said my bit. And I'm happy to ask questions, especially from the operation. So anyone know?
Thank you. Thank you. Really good points. Let's open it up for discussion. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just two very quick points. So not being part of local government New Zealand, could I go further and say that that would affect your KPIs as executive?
Well, it's got anything to do with information that we source through or out of LGNZ.
Yes. Okay, cool. The second point is just a comment, Mr. Chief Executive, just in regards to that conversation you had in the RMA space and reforms. Probably would have been a good idea if both Alison and I were there as commissioners and as the chair. Just some of the discussions that you had with, regarding RMA reforms.
That was down at Rural Provincial.
Oh, was it Rural and Provincial? Okay, understood.
Oh, we had the MFE lead and the steering group lead here yesterday.
Here at NDC.
Yeah,
that's what I'm referring to.
Well, it was just an update for the mayors.
Okay.
It's travelling around the country to roadshow.
Okay, cool. Is there anything that needs to trickle down? Just very quickly, I want to hold the process up. Nothing needs to trickle down.
No, and once the steering group releases, once I've done this around the traps, the steering group's releasing a paper, and it will be our intention to take things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, let's open it up.
Get it.
Further questions, comments? Councillor Ford.
Thank you. I'm probably of the view that the action we took was the right action. It got a reaction. We made a protest. We got publicity. We were respected because the president and the chief executive came to see us. They listened to us respectfully. I believe that there was some level of acknowledgement of wrongdoing and apology. I think the letter back to us was a reasonable letter. I think that one of the remits that's coming up is relevant to this discussion, and of course it's only a remit and it may not happen, but it may do. But I just think it's worth us taking that into account as part of our deliberation, that if the New Plymouth remit goes through, which would require LGNZ Council to poll members on significant issues, contentious issues, I think that would be a step forward, and it would help, would be a level of comfort to, in terms of the sorts of concerns that we've had over the handling of Three Waters. I think that if we do decide to stay as members, we should still write back politely, but and still stressing our position in relation to our disappointment over the way they handled the Three Waters, making it super clear of our position that we are being members for, I guess, for all the other reasons that our Chief Executive has highlighted this morning. I certainly acknowledge that a significant amount of the work they do is good, is positive. It's good for this council. There's other aspects of the work that is less so. I think some of it's quite disappointing, and of course we were worse than disappointed over the Three Waters issue. So I'm probably going to vote to stay as a member.
Thank you. Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I come today. Well, I did read Shane's report on the CEO's report on the reasons why we should stop in, and we certainly want to make it easy for our staff and for their situation to be access this information, and it obviously will cause a lot of pressure in our council if we don't. But I think I had to probably, after hearing what the CEO said today and what Michael said, I think, and I've been with Federated Farmers for years and I've opposed a lot of their things, but they have done, it's really, a message has been sent to them, and I think it does disappoint me. Even the speakers I've got for local government on their narrative, which is quite sad. But I think pressure, if you're in there, you can pressure them. So I think I would go Michael's way. I think I would vote to stay on the grounds that we keep putting pressure on those areas that we certainly don't agree with, and they are meant to represent us. So that's my take for the day.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and colleagues. I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for his explanations and his outlining some of the issues. I'll make no apology for tabling a notice of motion last year that I did to leave local government. Likewise, I make no apology for the address I made to council recently. Also, some 11 minutes worth, I think I bored my colleagues with as to why I still hold that. I still held that opinion. I'm very conscious that of the view of the majority of my colleagues, which I fully respect and I understand. However, members of the community have indicated that they also believe that we should withdraw from local government New Zealand. And you will be aware that I hold the view that everybody in the community has the right to have their view represented around the council table. So confident, I won't say confident, but given the comments by my colleagues, which I fully respect, I will cast a vote on behalf of those members of the community that think we should withdraw. And I do that with a clear conscience. And I also understand my colleagues' point of view and fully respect the decision that will be taken. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Corey.
Thank you. I'm not entirely convinced of the requirement to stay with local government New Zealand. I believe there'd be other avenues to gain priority information that was required. It disappoints me that LGNZ were explained, told, talked to on a number of occasions about the importance of this one issue. Now their ears were turned off in regard to that, and they just went blindly ahead and pressed forward. Now, talking only gets us so far. There is a requirement at times to take something further and stronger. And I believe that LGNZ, in their document they sent out, with the requirement to stay there mentioned about how they were working in regards to forestry. Now, forestry is another area that we've had to pick up on our own and incorporate that into our own situation, where we've employed our own people to present forestry reports. Now, I haven't seen anything from LGNZ that represents our view in regard to the forestation of New Zealand. And that disappoints me. And once again, it comes back, you can talk to them as much as you like, but they have been found wanting in a number of areas. I'm not impressed with the conference that's coming up this month. I'm not impressed with some of the speakers, and I'm not impressed with some of the topics. They seem hell-bent on doing their own thing and directing their body that pays them. This is the way it's going to be. Now, they've come to us and tried to explain it, but there comes a time when we have to say, hey, come on, guys, you're just not playing the game. And so I will vote against staying. I'll vote to leave. But, you know, they do need a warning shot fired over their heads. And quite frankly, we've done a lot of talking. They haven't done a lot of listening, and the time has come for some firmer action. I noticed that Timaru have left. The sky hasn't fallen in on Timaru. They haven't gone running back to join. And I believe they will carry on as normal. The sun will rise in the east and it'll set in the west, and people will carry on. So, yeah, I'll be voting to leave.
Thank you. Just a couple of points there, corrections. The forestry, what you said isn't actually quite correct. LGNZ is a partner in that forestry report. The consultants that were employed, LGNZ has put significant money into that. And then councils who were impacted even more directly by the forestry issue were invited to put additional money into it. So LGNZ is part of that. My understanding is that Timaru is to have that conversation about whether they wish to rejoin this year or not. That's still to come. The other point I'd make is that and as they pointed out, the National Council, which are our elected members who represent us on National Council, set the direction. And it was also spelled out again in the letter. Worth remembering is that with the number of mayors stepping down, plus whatever happens after the elections, straight after the local body elections, there will be a vote to who we put on to National Council. So we have an opportunity to influence. If we don't like what's coming out of there, there's our opportunity to change it. It wasn't just the Three Waters protest. We also, if you recall, expressed our disappointment about our zone reps who we don't believe have represented us. So that point has been picked up, and again, that reflects back to the people we put on National Council. So just a few points there. I believe we have made our protest along with other councils. It did get national media attention, and I will be supporting that we renew our membership with LGNZ. I think it also comes down to the people that you put in these roles, and the CE referred to the RMA one. You know, if you get the right representative from local government, as we have with Toby Adams, and the right attitude from the minister, that's a really good example of how a partnership can work and should work. Yeah. And yeah, so those are my thoughts. Councillor Marsh.
No, Casey had his hand up before me, then you can come back to me. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to note my colleagues' concerns and how they're going to vote, and I fully appreciate and support where you're coming from. I've both had those thoughts as well, and certainly acknowledging you as well, Councillor Quarry. I'm just disappointed through you, Your Worship, that in my role as elected member for nearly, coming up fast on 9 years, that's the first time I've seen the President of Local Government New Zealand come in to visit Manawatū District Council. And it's really sad that we had to protest in order to get them around the table. And I just want to acknowledge that this morning. But I do appreciate them taking the time to listen to our concerns and take note. So that was excellent. Folks, I will be in favour of staying with Local Government New Zealand. And I say that purely from the point of staff support, but also too is that it's better to affect change when we're in the tent as opposed to out of it. So I'll be looking to, who knows what the elections will grant us on the 8th, but certainly want to see that change at presidential level as far as I'm concerned. So thanks, folks. And again, I do appreciate where our fellow colleagues are coming from and their concerns. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Gita.
Yeah, I'll probably echo Councillor Casey. Councillor Casey's thoughts, particularly around, I think that obviously LGNZ has had a huge wake up, and then coming out here it is a big deal. We are a small council, so to get the big dogs come all the way out, I think that they are noticing that something is amiss with what they have been doing. You'd hope so. So look, in terms of my standing, I think I'm going to vote in favour of still being a member.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, everybody's comments have been great. I actually showed my hand earlier this morning, and my comments around just the order of flow as far as the business papers for today were concerned. So I'll be voting for. I agree, we've fired a shot over the bow, and we've had some reaction to that. But it does give me confidence in what our CEO has told us this morning, as while I was making my decision as well. And yes, just to Councillor Quarries, just while he was giving us that, I flicked back into emails, and the President on the 8th of April was stating around there of the carbon forestry, etc., and how those ranges of issues are on their policy agenda. So seeking submissions again along those lines. So, I mean, from that point of view, it gives Lisa the confidence going forward. And if we're to support these submissions that are both coming out of our council and LGNZ, then it's from a position of strength that we need to follow from.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
I wasn't particularly going to say anything, but I'm the only one who hasn't. So I'll be voting in support. I absolutely respect the positions of Councillor Hadfield and Quarry. I do believe we've shot a barrel over their bow, and they've taken notice. It would have been good if they could have informed us earlier that they'd signed a confidentiality clause, what they could and could not discuss with that. We might have understood better if we'd have known that. We took it as miscommunication. We already know that our Zone 3 rep is retiring this election, so there's no chance we'll get the same rep there. And the other thing, of course, is when we're sworn in as councillors, we are asked to do what's best for the organisation. And I think the Chief Executive has clearly outlined why remaining a member of Local Government New Zealand would be best for the organisation and for the staff.
Councillor Ford.
Two things. One's an opinion, one's a clarification. Just in terms of LGNZ elections and so on, I think we have the opportunity to appoint new zone reps, provincial, rural, provincial, etc. But the president and the vice president, that's a 3-year term, so that doesn't come up for another year. So just so that we're all understanding. Councillor Schultz mentioned the confidentiality clause, and I'm strongly of the view that they should have walked away from that, as opposed to because that was unacceptable in my view. Who did they owe their duty to? Was it their members, or was it to the government? And it should have been to us. So they should never have accepted that confidentiality clause. And I was really disappointed the way they came out with it and said, well, you don't know these things, but actually there was a confidentiality clause. You should have walked away, Mr. Crosby. Yeah.
Fully agree.
Yeah, do agree.
Right, thank you. So we go back to page 149, and we've got a couple of recommendations there. We've got Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that the Manawatū District Council remains a member of Local Government NZ and pays the annual subscription for the 2022 to 2023 year.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Brave enough to second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Thank you. You want your votes recorded?
Thank you.
Please, councillor Hadfield and Quarry. The motion is carried. Thank you. Right.
Can I just raise a point?
Councillor Marsh.
During the discussion, Councillor Ford mentioned that he would like to see a letter going forward. From my point of view, I think our protest has been made, and I think our invoice should just be paid without any letters going backwards and forwards.
No, I'd disagree. Your worship, I'd disagree with that. I think it's a valid point, and the more we can reinforce with them the degree of dissatisfaction that is here, the better.
Then I would counter that in the fact that Councillor Hadfield did give mention to his 11-minute scribe, which he was dissatisfied with. Do we include all that information in that letter, or are we just picking the one topic that we feel the most about?
Your worship, if I may.
Councillor.
I think, I agree with the fact that we've done very well in terms of firing a shot across the bow, right from the first notice of motion I tabled, and even to the Radio New Zealand that covered some of my points I made in recent times. I think that's actually has achieved significantly what the council in some ways set out to achieve. However, I've given my reasons for voting against, but I'm of the view that, as Councillor Ford has suggested, a letter going back to Local Government New Zealand saying that council has voted to remain a member, pointing out that it was not unanimous, further reinforces, I think, it actually is the final shot in saying actually we were dissatisfied, and that would be my view.
Thank you. And that would also be factual that it wasn't a unanimous decision. Thank you. Right. Our last item is our late item, which is the remits to the Local Government New Zealand annual AGM, which is at the end of July. So there are 6 remits being put forward that NDC will have a vote on. So given this is the last council meeting before we attend the AGM, we need to come up with an NDC view on each of the 6. How do we want to do this? You want to take us through them, or? There is a summary page which summarises each of the remits, and which outlines what it's all about, and then more detail under each remit. So the first one is that seeking central government to fully and permanently fund free public transport for students, community services card holders under 25s, and mobility card holders and support people. Now, I noticed that this is put forward and supported by the metro sector. Since I'm talking, my view is that what happens in the metro world doesn't necessarily fit for rural and provincial. So I would not be supporting that one, but let's open it up for comment. Councillor Hadfield.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Casey, for letting me go first. You're welcome. That's fine. Look, I concur, Your Worship. I'm actually quite concerned about the view in the metro and the city areas versus the regional, provincial and regional councils, where public transport is actually significantly more of a service for people that actually do not have access to other means of transport. And I find it untenable that a policy would come out that further burdens ratepayers through subsidy, either from ratepayers and taxpayers, through either the regional council or the government. in a transport system that is actually going to get more expensive to run as carbon policies take hold and the cost of buses and everything escalates. Cost of an e-bus is significantly more than a fuel efficient diesel bus. So I have grave concerns that this is again a metro one size fits all remit, and I can only say that I'm vehemently opposed to it.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
Your Worship, it's really a light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek comment for those with gold cards should really declare conflict of interest in regards to this treatment and let that be noted for the record. Your Worship, I wonder if we could just have a little bit more time, just have a quick read through that discussion.
Well, we do need to make a decision either way today on each of these remits.
Understood.
We'll carry on with the discussion. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I've not heard of the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity group, but I think a lot of this is around metros. And what about those communities that actually have no public transport? That's where I would come from a rural council. And just looking at their list of who they think should be subsidised, I'm surprised they've actually put under 25s. Because I think if you were an under 25 who was a student or on a job seeker benefit or whatever, they might be implying that the rest of the items there would cover it, because you could be a 25-year-old on $100,000 salary. Do we want, aren't they able to pay their own bus fees? So I'm not sure why that's there. But I think it's more around equity across the country and access and accessibility rather than price. We've got to have more public transport first rather than subsidised.
Councillor Belsky.
I completely endorse Councillor Hadfield's comments and I vehemently oppose it.
Thank you. So if there's no further specific comment, let's have a vote on that submission. So central government funding for public transport, all those in favour of that remit, raise your hand. Opposed to that remit? Thank you. NDC vote is do not support. The second one is a review of the government transport funding, and simply this is led by New Plymouth District Council asking LGNZ to call for an independent review on the way in which government through Waka Kotahi funds transport investments in the country. This includes funding of new developments and maintenance programs. I would struggle to see why we would not support this.
Exactly.
Is there anyone who would not support that? No. Councillor Ford?
I'm not answering the question. I'm interested in perhaps the General Manager Infrastructure's view.
Put you on the spot.
Councillor,
I saw some eyes rolling.
Change back to council now on the computer.
So the remit is asking LGNZ to call for an independent review on the way the government through Waka Kotahi funds transport investments in the country, and that includes funding of new developments and maintenance programs.
Yes, good idea.
Thank you. Right. So, so that is a unanimous support for the
shortest speech he's ever made.
He couldn't go down on one of his own little tracks. That's why.
Box me into a yes, no. So
it's probably more the amount of funding.
Yeah, the amount of funding. Exactly.
Well,
right. Remit 3 is seeking LGNZ implement a nationwide working group to have a look at illegal street racing, to formulate an action plan to enforce the Transport Act,
set it up properly,
and work with the police to tackle illegal street racing and antisocial behaviour associated with it. And that's something that this council's talked about and raised many a time. Councillor Shaw.
So I'm assuming that illegal street racing would also include what do they call them? Skid parties out in the country. And to me, the issue, some of the things that we put up with in the country, like you've probably heard me say before, there's an intersection just down the road from me that council did up beautifully, made it a much safer intersection. But the car enthusiasts come regularly, about once a fortnight, and they shred tyres and rip the place up. And every single time the police are rung, and they do not come because there might be 50 of them. If that happened in town, the police would go. Because it happens in the country, the police say, thank you, noted, we might send someone to observe. So if that covers that,
Yes, it does.
I definitely support it.
Yes, the detail in that document does cover all of that kind of activity. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Grant, do you want to go first, or you all right?
No, way go, Jack. Yeah.
It's just a comment. I'm just having a quick scan through here, Your Worship, and you may have picked up. There's actually no, I can't see anything, folks, and please correct me if there's a campaign to ensure that we actually have adequate and appropriate policing in our regions and districts in order to police policies and bylaws, etc., that local government and central government impose. Because what's the point? You can have as many, we just simply don't have enough police. And I don't know if that's been captured in there or not.
Absolutely. However, I would have thought that formulating an action plan, one of the key things would be being able to resource police to tackle the problem.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Head.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And look, I'm actually opposed to this. And I'm opposed to this because actually illegal street racing is a job for the police funded by the government. This is, I don't see that local government New Zealand implementing a nationwide working group is going to be anything more than a talk fest, with councils actually not being able to do anything because it is not our job as a council, and it's not the job of our ratepayers to fund enforcement or any activity that involves breaking law. It is entirely, in my view, a matter for police and for policing. And I just see this as another avenue to central government pushing more the way of our way, and I'll keep on harping on about this, without any resourcing. That is my view, so I don't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Unbelievably, I'm in agreement with Grant. So, which is one out of the bag for me.
Yeah, Councillor Marsh, it's fine here, please.
I mean, it hits me too in the fact of LGNZ implementing a nationwide working group. That just, I can't see that that's going to be a good thing at all. It should be up to the police to implement. We've all got our bylaws, etc., as Councillor Casey stated. They just need to be brought forward with the police.
Thank you, Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I agree with either side of me because of the fact is we had a Minister of Police at one stage who was going to crush cars and whatever, and had the power to do it, and it goes on, and so they do have the power, they have the authority, and I think local government just needs to not put any more money. And if there's a working group put together, it'll be cost mega bucks.
Councillor Corey.
Yeah, agree with the last few speakers. There is a major issue in regard to boy races in the country. There is damage on numerous corners and the events take place Friday, Saturday night. There's no question about that. It's just another talk fest. It's not going to achieve anything unless there are police willing to smash some cars up. It's not going to change. There is no punishment to those offenders. And consequently, what's the point? It's really going to achieve nothing unless it's policed.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Just one other additional point. I believe this proposal has come forward because all other avenues have actually been exhausted. I know through talking to Mayor Helen that mayors are talking to regional police commanders. They're getting nowhere. It needs to go higher. So if we have a national response that goes to the Minister of Police, I think we've exhausted all the other avenues and nothing's changed. And I certainly agree with those who it is a policing issue. But if we need to give a collective message from around the country that, we're over it and they need to be doing something about it.
I was just going to make a comment too around councillor Quarry's comment. I mean, we know up the Pongana Valley, there's 3 or 4 infringers. Who they are and where they park their cars. I've even taken number plates and reported it in here. And they're registered to vans and yet they're on sedans. So I mean, the police are chasing their tails now. To have a nationwide working group set up by LGNZ is not going to achieve anything at all. The next one that we're looking at is that LGNZ lobby government. That's what they should be doing with that remit there around the street racing. They should be lobbying government.
Thank you, councillor Ford.
Yeah, I just got fell off my chair because I find myself agreeing with councillor Marsh. I think that is all that's needed.
Thank you, Michael.
We don't need to set up LGNZ doesn't need to set up a working group. National Council needs to just get together. They have a lot of very high level meetings with government. Stuart Crosby was saying he meets the Prime Minister monthly.
Fantastic.
Can all just be done. Yeah, just represent. I mean, I don't think there'll be a council in New Zealand that goes, we love boy races and the skip parties or something.
Okay, councillor Shaw.
Having heard those very valid points, permission to change my mind. I think, you know, I agree that actually, you know, dealing directly with government rather than a working party probably is much more cost effective. So I support that and I'll withdraw mine.
Thank you.
Still for the same reasons, but.
So what I'm hearing is that NBC does not support the remit of illegal street racing. All those who support that view?
Can we put forward a comment with regard to that?
Yeah.
You know, an explanatory note saying we don't support it for this and it should be adopted or met in another manner.
Yes, we can. You can actually have the opportunity to speak to it.
Yes.
Against it. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good point. So we do not support that one. Number 4, the LGNZ lobby the government to implement an infringement notice regime for general bylaws.
Just a little bit of explanation. Yeah. Currently under our bylaws, the government act provisions for bylaw enforcement, the only way we can enforce the bylaw is to prosecute, which means we have to lay a charge in the courts and we have to follow it through the courts. You get no change out of 10 grand.
Yeah.
And so therefore you don't see a lot of prosecutions around bylaws. Infringement notice just allows our enforcement guys, like they do with litter, someone offends, they write an infringement notice and
here's your fine.
Here's your fine.
Makes sense.
And that way you get a practical application of enforcement of the rules you put in place. Otherwise,
how do you enforce that fine?
Goes to court. So
and how does the court enforce that?
So the court, so you lodge an infringement notice and they have 28 days to pay. And if they don't pay, they have another 28 days. And if they don't pay, they're summoned to appear in court.
They have to appear in court?
They have to appear. Well, they don't have to. No, the court can also enter into a judgment if they don't appear.
And issue a warrant.
And they can, they won't issue a warrant for an infringement offence. But the court can add to the infringement.
Yes, they can charge, but apart from going around and seizing property, how do they enforce that payment? You could for a ratepayer, put it on their rates, but if you can't put it on their rates, how can you actually enforce that payment?
Only ways through the court. And the bailiffs then have to recover.
But if they don't pay?
Bailiff. You don't get the money.
So what you're saying is this gives some power, by supporting this would give them the power to implement that.
It allows our staff to write an infringement notice, somebody who infringes against their bylaw, as opposed to taking prosecute. Same prosecution, you prosecute somebody in court, and the court finds and fines them, it's no different if they don't pay the fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to make.
Yeah, it's no different. It's the same process, just you go about it a different way.
And the enforcement of that fine comes back to the council, doesn't it?
No. No, it stays in the court.
But they're still, you know, if okay, you've got charges, you've got the fine, but if you don't pay, you still don't pay.
There's plenty of people out there that got a lot of fines at that.
Councillor Hatfield.
Yeah, so thanks for the explanation, Shane. It really is no different to the process of a parking fine. There's an infringement notice for the fine being issued. If you don't pay it, there's a process that goes through the courts. Then it becomes the issue for the courts rather than the council.
Yeah.
Right, so it pragmatically makes sense.
Well, councils have actually been lobbying for this change for a long time now. And it's never got through government, but they haven't done anything.
Look, I think that's a good idea, but a supplementary would that mean then that we would have to produce a schedule of infringement fees for our bylaws?
Yeah.
And that would be a simple process.
Well, the government or us will. So in some pieces of legislation, you can issue an infringement notice, and the government defines what those infringement fees are. Parking regulations are a classic.
Right.
The government has a set schedule, and the transport regulations around what those offences
Can be.
And
So whatever it is, it's not arduous. Right. I'll support it.
Councillor Belsky.
Can you take these people to the small claims?
No.
Oh, you
Okay.
Small claims is what they call a court. So it's got to be a negligence claim or a loss.
Oh,
to
okay.
qualify for
So what I'm hearing is that we would support this. All those in favour? Thank you. Support the remit on bylaw infringements. Number 5, this is to do with density and proximity of vaping retailers. Asking that LGNZ request the government to restrict the sale of vaping products to R18 specialist vape stores and develop proximity limits to prevent the clustering of vaping products, retailers, and protect young people. So I'm assuming this is to bring it in line with alcohol rules.
It's similar. So they don't want vaping next to schools or preschools or different parts of the community, and I think it's valid.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, see 2 or 3 of them vaping, you can't see the school anyway. Vaping goes in.
So on that basis, it would make sense to support this.
Yes, it would. Yep.
All those in favour? Against? Thank you. We support the remit on density and proximity of vaping. And the final one, polling of LGNZ members. This is a late remit that has come. This is asking LGNZ to adopt a policy to poll their membership on any significant issues affecting local government prior to making that decision. And this goes back to our 3 waters discussion and what happened. And this would require them to do that. They want a policy in conjunction with the membership that sets out the threshold for polling the membership, and in the interim, the decision about the threshold for polling rests with the National Council. Again, it comes back to the direction that National Council and us carefully considering who we vote for and support to go on National Council. To me, it makes absolute sense to support this one. Do I hear any objections against? Councillor Hadfield?
Not an objection, Your Worship, but what worries me is a small group actually determining or having power over the threshold. And I think that's actually the significant area. And I don't know how you'd word it differently, to be honest.
It's only an interim, isn't it?
That's for the interim until the policy is in place.
Right, okay.
So we're asking them ultimately to set a policy, which will take a bit of time to develop, but in the meantime, so that we actually get it considered case by case.
And look, they may even poll the membership on the actual threshold, if we're lucky.
Right, so we would, Councillor Quarry?
It's a thing that we shouldn't have to be voting on. It should automatically be part of the policy, and disappointing it has to be.
Has to get to this.
To get to this.
I think that if they do it right, it shouldn't be a policy. It should be a party.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll get it the right way, and then there's no doubt about the national. It's the Constitution that binds the National Council. So that's right.
Right. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, and just on that too, I'm in agreement with the remit, but I think it needs to be noted there that when it does come back to us, no different than the changes in legislation, etc., which we've set up that special committee for, and it's probably something that's going to require, because of the speed of things that are going to hit and the responses that are going to be, the timelines are going to be the critical factor.
Councillor Belston.
Just my opposing to the remit in this one word is that the government of Aotearoa, that's not the registered name of our country, it should be the government in New Zealand.
Okay. Right. So, Councillor Ford.
I'm in favour of the remit, but it is somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction to what happened over Three Waters. Electing a national council, which is pretty jolly big, is it 20-something members? You would have thought that this wouldn't be necessary. We somehow ended up with a national council that decided, and I don't recall any message from the members that what the National Council had done in the past, as in took a more adversarial approach with government, and in some cases combative approach. The National Council decided that was all wrong, and what we have to do is work with government no matter what. We need to be in the tent, we need to be at the table, and that just seemed to completely overshadow all their decision making. And in our view, I think they made some wrong decisions, particularly over the three waters, because they were so keen to be in that tent, in the room, at the table with the government. So I think that this is a good move, and it's timely, and it does, if it gets passed, it will provide a lot of comfort to councils like ours who felt that LGNZ just read the room completely wrongly. But if it wasn't for this issue, would we be interesting? Would we have the same view? So I'm in favour of it, but maybe in 5 years' time, as the Chief Executive said, maybe it should just be part of the Constitution. That might be right, but we really should be able to trust our National Council, and we've been let down.
I think the point that Chief Executive has made around being part of the Constitution should form part of our response on that.
We can talk about it. Interestingly, at Rural Provincial, the President acknowledged that in the National Council's view, the makeup of the National Council is too big. Having 22 to 24 people sitting around a table, when in actual fact you probably should have 5 or 6, is wrong. So they announced that they will be undertaking a constitutional review. It will take some time. So I guess these types of measures probably in place, and then they wrapped up in their review, I would hope. But I think a constitutional review is appropriate for LGNZ at the times right for that.
I think the most important thing is that members do not lose, as we're currently seeing. We don't lose influence. Members do not lose influence to overarching governance type bodies.
Well, that comes back to the importance of the right people standing and the right people being elected.
And we heard a classic example of that with the meeting that we had with the leaders on the RMA the other day. Tony Adams, who's the mayor of Hauraki, and also their zone rep. When we said to him, we never hear from our zone reps, wouldn't have a clue what they're talking about. They never ask us or tell us, and he couldn't believe it. He said he regularly sends emails and contacts his zone councils about, so that they're up to speed with what's happening. So it goes back to who the people are that you put on that.
Actually, the mayor and I couldn't even name representatives of our zone. So that's that's our core representation.
Core communications.
Yeah, absolutely. But his was an example of someone doing their national council role well.
Yep.
Okay, so we are saying that we support the remit on polling LGNZ members. All those in favour? Thank you, and support. Excellent, thank you. So that brings us to the end of.
I've got all that, so that's all done.
Yep, we've got each of those. Ellie, you've got all those?
The capturing resolution.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm happy to move that the council, one, does not support the remit on central government funding for public transport. Two, supports the remit on the review of government transport funding. Three, does not support the remit on illegal street racing. Four, supports the remit on bylaw infringements. Five, supports the remit on density and proximity of vaping retailers. And six, supports the remit on the polling of LGNZ members. Councillor Fort, seconded. Thank you. Put motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you. Right, so we can front up to the AGM on the 28th of July, which I understand is via Zoom. Registrations, I think something came out about that the other day. Yep. So we'll remind everybody about that to register for that. And we also need to, we can do that later. We're allowed to register 3 people for the AGM, so we'll talk about that later. So that being the case, what brings us to the end of our agenda, and I will declare our meeting closed.